The high desert stretched out beneath the sinking sun like an ocean of rust and gold. Sagebrush rolled in the wind, carrying the dry scent of dust and far-off rain. Somewhere beyond the ridges, a Henry circled a small black cross against a vast apricot ski. Navajo Henry watched it with a stillness that came from years of discipline. The kind of quiet a man learns when loss has already hollowed out half his heart. He rode alongside the scouting party, his horse's hooves clicking over the shale. Strapped to his saddle was the beaded doll of his daughter, Weenie, a small comfort in the darkening hours. She was only 7, but sharp-tongued and observant like a woman much older. The tribe often joked she had been born with the soul of an ancient grandmother. Tonight though, no one joked. Weenie was missing. Henry's jaw tightened as he scanned the rugged landscape. The tracks they followed were fresh, too fresh. Bowprints, 3 sets, heading south toward the broken hills. Scalp hunters, Mexican renegades who had traded buffalo hides for Apache hair in years past. They were the worst sort of men, the kind who would use a child for bait if it profited them. Henry tasted iron in his mouth at the thought. Her footsteps falter here, said Running Crane, kneeling beside a cluster of rocks. Looks like she stumbled. Henry's heart punched against his ribs. Weenie was quick as a fox, clever enough to hide from a full patrol when she wanted to, but she was still just a child, and the desert had no mercy. We move, Henry said, his voice a low command. They rode harder, pushing past the boulders and into a narrow draw, where the wind cried between the stones. Dusk settled fast, pulling Violet Sados across the basin. That was when Henry saw it something small and pale near a cluster of juniper. It leapt from his horse before the others even called out. But it wasn't Winnie. It was a woman, a white woman in field clothes, dusty from travel, kneeling in the dirt with a child's limp body in her arms. Winnie's hair, black as a raven's wing, spilled over her forearm. The woman held the girdle tight, murmuring something Henry couldn't understand. His vision tunneled. He saw only Winnie's still face. Ew. Henry's voice cut through the canyon like a blade. Put the child down. The woman jerked, startled, her hands tightened protectively around Winnie instead of releasing her. She's dehydrated, she blurted. I gave her water, she fainted. Please, she needs help. The Apache warriors closed in. Bows raised, but the woman backed up, shielding Winnie with her own body. She looked terrified, but determined. Henry mistook it for guilt. You dare touch my daughter? His English was rough, accented, but clear. You took her from her people. What? No. Her eyes widened with disbelief and fear. He found her collapsed. He was trying to listen to me. Enough, Henry growled. He moved forward, swift as a striking cat. 2 warriors seized the woman by the arms, wrenching Winnie gently out of her grasp. The girl's breathing was shallow but steady. Relief washed heavy and momentary over Henry, followed by a rising fury. The woman struggled. Let me go. I didn't take her. He saved her. Her words tangled with the wind, half lost to Henry's anger and the language barrier. She kicked once, but the warriors held fast. One tied her wrists with a leather cord while she cried out, "Don't do this. You're making a mistake." Henry ignored her. The desert had shown him enough death to harden his judgments. Many white people had played tricks before, tears on their faces ceases, knives in their boots. Bring her, Henry ordered coldly. The ride back to camp was lit by the rising moon. The woman, Alla Hayes, though they did not yet know her name, sat slumped across a horse, wrists bound, dust streaking her cheeks. She called out twice, pleading for them to understand, but no one answered. It was not cruelty. It was certainty. In their eyes, she was guilty. When they reached the camp, a circle of types glowing in firelight. Henry carried Winnie to the medicine lodge. The old healer inspected the girl, nodding slowly. She will live. As the words loosened something tight and painful inside Henry, but the relief lasted only a moment before the weight of judgment returned. The warriors dragged the prisoner forward. The tribal council gathered, led by Henry's father, Gray Antelope, a man of 60 winters with a gaze carved from stone. Ella stood before them, wrists raw, clothed taut horn from her struggle. She looked around in bewilderment and awe, as though realizing she had stumbled into the living heart of the very people she had spent years studying. Grey Antelope's voice rumbled like distant thunder. This woman is accused of stealing the heir's child. At sonrise, she will face death. Ella's breath hitched. Death. No, please. You don't understand. She tried to break free, twisting her wrists until her skin split. He didn't kidnap her. He found her. The warriors pushed her to her knees. Her voice rose in panic. Listen to me. I didn't hurt that little girl. He helped her. Why won't you listen? Her desperation fell flat against the council's silence. She tried one last time, lunging upward, only to be shoved back down. Her cheek hit the dirt. A sob escaped her, fierce and frustrated. Henry watched without expression. He had already chosen what to believe. By nightfall, she was tied to a pole at the edge of camp, guarded by two warriors who whispered about her erratic sobbing, sometimes laughter, sometimes tears. She stared at the stars like a woman scolding heaven for playing tricks on her. This is what I get, she muttered bitterly. Trying to be independent, trying to help. Brilliant, Ella. The desert wind swallowed her words as the fire crackled low, and the long night settled around her like a sentence already carried out. The desert night had grown cold by the time Ella slipped into a restless half-leap. Her wrists throbbed beneath the rawhide bindings. Her back ached from hours pressed against the miter post. Somewhere a coyote called long and lonely, its cry rolling through the dark like a warning from another world. She blinked skyward, eyes gritty with exhaustion. The heavens were so bright, so impossibly wide, they seemed to mock her. Independence, she thought bitterly. Freedom. Those had been such proud words a week ago. Now she sat tied to a post in the middle of an Apache camp, waiting for dawn to deliver a death sentence she didn't deserve. At some point, she drifted off again, only to jerk awake with a choking sob. One of the guards lifted an eyebrow. She's cracked, he murmured in Apache to the other. Ella didn't need to understand the language to interpret the look. She let out a breathless, humorless laugh. If I'm crazy Tracy, she whispered to herself. It's because none of this makes any sense. But as the sky pat to grey-blue, something inky her shifted, something soft and stubborn, lodged deep in her chest. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was the way the desert felt like a cradle even when it meant to bury her. Without thinking, she began to hum. It started small, just a thread of melody curling through cracked lips. The tune came from a place long abandoned, a childhood bedroom back east, her mother's cool hand smoothing her hair, the smell of lavender water and linen sheets. Then she began to sing. The Irish lullaby rose into the dawn, fragile but unwavering, floating above the camp as though carried by invisible wings. The guards stiffened. One sat straighter. Not because they understood the words, but because the sound did not match the woman they had dragged here in fury. It was too gentle, too full of something the desert rarely offered. Grace. In the medicine lodge on the far side of camp, Winnie stirred beneath her blankets. Her lashes fluttered. The soft foreign music slipped into her dreams like warm sunlight. She sat up, sleepy and confused, heart fluttering like a sparrow. That son, she whispered. She pushed aside the hide flap and stepped barefoot into the cool morning air. The world was washed in the pale gold light of first sunrise. She followed the strange melody as though pulled by an invisible thread. Near the outskirts of camp, she found Ella slumped, bowed, singing with her face turned toward the awakening skill. Rosie, why? Why is she tied up? Winnie asked softly. Ella didn't notice the small figure approaching until tiny hands touched her cheeks. She startled, looking down at the child she had nearly died protecting. Hey there, Ella whispered, her voice. You're awake. Winnie frowned with innocent intonation. Why are they hurting you? You saved me. Before Ella could answer, the sound of pounding footsteps rushed toward them. Henry burst into the clearing, hair loose from sleep, face carved with panic. Winnie, he barked, sweeping his daughter into his arms. He told you not to wonder. But Winnie struggled, pushing against him. Papa, no, she's not bad. She helped me. Henry froze, his grip loosening just enough for the girl to look him squarely in the eyes. She gave me water when he insisted. She scared away the bad man. She carried me when I was too tired. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Henry's jaw clenched. He turned slowly toward Ella. She met his eyes, tired, wounded, but unflinching. There was no triumph there. No plea for mercy, just the weary certainty of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Ask your daughter again, Ella rasped. Ask her where I found her. Ask her if I ever once tried to hurt her. So he did. The questioning took time. Winnie described everything with a child's honest simplicity. The dark canyon, the bad man's shouts, the scraping of her knees when she fell, the way Ella had lifted her as if she weighed no more than a handful of feathers. She told them how Ella had cried when she thought Winnie might die. Piece by piece, the truth settled over the clearing like a slow, inevitable sunrise. When Winnie finished, she wrapped her arms tightly around Ella's waist, glaring at the grown man as though daring them to disagree. She's good, the girl declared. She saved me. A violence followed. A deep, heavy silence full of sheets and shifting judgment. Gray Antelope arrived, leaning on his coiled staff. His eyes swept over Ella, her swollen wrists, her dust-covered hair, the child clinging to her, and then finally landed on Henry. The accusations were wrong, the old chief said quietly. Henry's throat tightened, his pride twisted inside him like barbed wire. He had been so certain, so unquestioning, and in his certainty he had nearly killed an innocent woman. He stepped toward her. We made a mistake, he forced out. You will be released. The guards cut Ella's bindings. She nearly collapsed as feeling rushed back into her hands. Henry reached out instinctively to catch her, but she jerked away. Don't touch me, she snapped. A few warriors winced at the venom in her tone. Henry absorbed it without flinching. It deserved worse. You may go when you wish, he said stiffly. Ella flexed her raw hands, grimacing. After nearly being executed, yes, I imagine I'll want to go very soon. But before she could take a step, Winnie tugged her sleeve. Please stay, the girl begged just for a little while. Ella opened her mouth to refuse, but hesitation slipped in quiet and unexpected. She had come west searching for history. She had stumbled straight into the heart of it. And somehow, absurdly, a child she'd known for less than a day, looked at her as though she were someone worth holding on to. Maybe, Ella thought. Used a few days. Henry watched the indecision flicker across her features. His face remained a mask, but something loosened in his shoulders, something he wasn't ready to name. The desert sun lifted higher, washing them all in a soft, forgiving light, as though dawn itself had chosen to correct the errors of men. Ella stayed at first because Winnie pleaded, and second because the chief himself insisted on offering proper hospitality after such a grave misunderstanding, but a third reason, quieter and more private, took root in her chest. She wanted to understand these people beyond the books and sketches she had spent years studying. By mid-morning she had been shown to a guest lodge, a simple lean-to of hides and willow poles. It wasn't much, but the women who guided her were warm in their way. They brought her blankets, water, and a woven basket filled with most white cakes. They watched her with the curiosity of people examining a creature both foreign and unexpectedly interesting. When she bowed her head in thanks, they giggled, not mockingly, more like they were charmed. Soon they began asking questions in a mixture of broken English gestures and laughter. Ella did her best to answer, drawing little pictures in the dust to help them understand. One woman touched her hair with awe. Another admired the embroidery on her dusty blouse. It wasn't long before Ella was teaching them things. Here, she said, gathering a few smooth pebbles and pine needles. You can make a kind of perfume if you warm these with animal fat. She demonstrated the way women back east softened their hands and braided their hair. To her surprise, the Apache women leaned closer, eager students. A grandmother with silver thread braids sniffed the mixture and gave a pleased nod. A young mother tried the hair braiding trick and gasped when the style held firm. The circle around Ella grew. So did the laughter. From across the camp, Henry noticed it. Women clustered together, chattering like songbirds. The white woman in their midst moving her hands quickly, face bright with animation. He frowned, watching her lean over a girl's shoulder to adjust a braid. He had expected her to cling to the guest lodge, brooding over her near execution. Yet there she was, surrounded by half the village, teaching them how to rub scented oil on their fingertips. The unexpectedness of it unsettled him. A foreign woman should have been frightened, resentful, or at least cautious. But Ella stepped straight in. He turned away before she could notice him watching. Later that afternoon, Ella found herself helping a pair of warriors repair a torn sleeve, not out of obligation, but because one of them had thrust the garment into her hands with a hopeful grin. She knelt in the shade, stitching carefully. Soon the men around her began joking in Apex English, and once Ella caught enough words to guess their meaning, she joined in. It was then she made her mistake. One of the younger warriors, Black Coyote, muttered something about the heir's stone face. Ella perked up. "Oh, you mean Henry?" she asked. Several men exchanged looks of both delight and danger. Ella rose to her feet, squared her shoulders, and dropped her voice an octave. Her impersonation was devastating. "I am Navajo Henry," she declared, crossing her arms, jaw set like granite. "I speak 5 words a day. If you want more than that, consult the spirits." The warriors howled with laughter. Ella continued, warming to the performance. She stalked in a stiff line, mimicking his rigid stride. She narrowed her eyes into that piercing, unreadable stare of his. She even perfected the sharp exhale he used to express disapproval without saying a word. The men were doubled over. One slapped his knee. Another collapsed backward into the dust, helpless with mirth. Encouraged, she pressed on. "And remember," she announced in her best Henry impression, "I do not smile ever. If you see my lips move, it is only to deliver judgment." More laughter erupted. A passing group of women stopped, listened, and began giggling, though. Ella grinned, triumphant, until she noticed the sudden silence. The warriors stopped laughing one by one. The women scattered. Even Black Coyote suddenly found his moccasins very interesting. Ella didn't have to turn around. She felt the weight of the presence behind her like a cold draft. But she turned anyway. Henry stood there, arms crossed, dark brows raised just enough to signal that yes indeed, he had heard every blessed word. For a suspended moment, no one breathed. Ella cleared her throat. "Ah, well, that was purely academic." Black Coyote mouthed sullenly. "Run." She took his advice. Her skirt swirled as she bolted between the lodges. Warriors jumped aside to let her pass. Children stared. A dog barked in confession. And somewhere behind her, a sound rose low at first. "Impossible." Disbelieving laughter. Navajo Henry was laughing. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, warm, rough, too long buried. The kind of laugh a man forgets how to make after grief has lived in his bones for years. Those who heard it froze mid-step. Some whispered, others simply stared, stunned. When Ella dared peek over a stack of firewood, she saw him still standing there, head slightly bowed, shoulders shaking once with lingering amusement. He had never looked so human. "Lord help me," she thought, pressing a hand over her mouth. "Now I've really done it." Word spread like prairie fire. By sundown, half the tribe was murmuring about the white woman who made the air laugh. A few teased Henry directly. He ignored them with practiced stoicism, but could not quite smother the ghost of a smile. Gray Antelope, however, was not amused. He summoned Henry to his fire that night. The old man's face glowed red in the flames. Deep lines carved with disappointment. "The people talk," Gray Antelope said. "They say your heart leans toward the woman." "It does not," Henry replied too quickly. His father's eyes narrowed. "You forget yourself. A leader's heart belongs first to his people. Do not let a stranger loosen your judgment." Henry didn't answer, mostly because he wasn't sure if his father was wrong. Later, alone, he watched Winnie slip into Ella's lodge to say good night. He saw the way Ella bent to hug the child gently, careful of her still tender injuries. He told himself it meant nothing, but his chest felt tight. Across the camp, Ella could not sleep. Not because she feared reprisal, but because she could still hear that laugh, quite startled and full of a laugh the desert had nearly stolen from him. She lay awake under the vast star-freckled sky, wondering why the memory of it made her heart feel both frightened and strangely warm. The days that followed moved with the quiet rhythm of desert life, slow in appearance, though beneath the surface, something in the camp began to shift. Ella felt it first. Women sought her out with questions about sewing, about hair braiding, about odd white lady tricks she had demonstrated with berries and pine resin. Children followed her like little quail, asking for stories of faraway cities with tall buildings and streets made from white manstone. Not even a few warriors had grown fond enough of her to tease her, though politely, as if still unsure whether she was a guest, or a storm that had blown in, and refused to leave. But Henry kept his distance. When she passed him, he greeted her with a curt nod, nothing more. The look in his eyes remained careful, reserved, like a man stepping on thin ice. Ella told herself she was glad. After all, she wasn't here to make friends, and certainly not to complicate her life with a brooding widower or, with shoulders like carved oak and a stubborn streak white as the Rio Grande. Yet every time she saw him tighten Winnie's braids or lift his daughter into the saddle with gentle hands, something tugged in by Ezra. One afternoon, Ella walked to the river with a tin cup, hoping to collect water. She didn't see Henry until he stepped from behind a cottonwood tree, leading his horse. They both paused. "Good afternoon," Ella said, trying to sound casual. Henry inclined his head. "You should not walk alone. Wolves hunt early this season." She raised a brow. "Wolves or irritated heirs who catch me mocking them in public." His lips twitched just barely, but the almost smile sent a peculiar flutter through her stomach. "Both," he replied. For a moment they simply stood there, river murmuring between them, wind carrying the sharp scent of juniper. Something unspoken pressed the air tighter. Something neither of them was ready to touch. Henry broke it first. "My father has spoken," he said quietly, eyes on the water. "He believes your presence confuses the people." "Confuses how?" Ella asked. He hesitated, a rare thing for him. "They talk," Henry said. "About me, about you." Ella felt her throat tighten. "And you don't like that?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted over the riverbanks, saltful, heavy. "At first," Henry said, "I thought you were trouble, a woman who fell into our lives with questions and noise and no sense of danger." "Well," Ella muttered, "you weren't exactly sunshine either." That turned her the ghost of another smile. "But then," Henry continued, "I saw the children gather near you." So Winnie laughed in ways she has not laughed since her mother died. Ella's chest softened. She looked away so he wouldn't see it. "You have brought life back into this camp," Henry murmured. "And life always stirs rumors." So that was it. His father feared weakness. The tribe feared change. Henry feared. She didn't know what Henry feared, but she had begun to recognize it in his eyes whenever he looked at her too long. "Do you want me to go?" she asked gently. His voice came rough, scraped from somewhere deep. "No." The word hung in the air between them, raw, honest, too exposed. But Henry straightened quickly, pulling himself back behind that wall of Apache stoicism. "It is complicated," he said. "You know nothing of our ways," and he cut off. Ella sensed what he hadn't said. "And I do not know how to open the door that has been shut since my wife died." She stepped toward him. "Just one step." "Henry," she said softly, "I'm not trying to take anything from you or from your people." He looked at her, then really looked. For the first time, she saw not the warrior, not the heir, but the man. A man caught between respect for tradition and the faint, dangerous hope of something beyond survival, something like companionship, something like warmth. That evening, the entire tribe gathered around the central fire to tell stories. Smoke spiraled into the cooling air, carrying the scent of sage and pine. Elders recited tales of old raids and victories. Children leaned against their mothers, eyes half closed. Ella sat beside Winnie, who tugged at her sleeve every few seconds to whisper translations. Then an elder spoke of Henry's wife, Dancing Fawn, whose laughter once lit every corner of the camp. How she died bringing Winnie into the world. How Henry had not smiled since. Ella felt her breath catch. She looked at Henry across the fire. His face remained stone, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. Winnie looked between them with the uncanny wisdom of a child old beyond her years. "You make him smile," she whispered. Ella's cheeks warmed. "Winnie, sweetheart. It just finds me ridiculous." "No." The girl shook her head with certainty. "Papa was dead inside. You woke him up." The words struck Ella like a stone in the chest. She swallowed hard and looked away, only to meet Henry's eyes watching her across the flames. It wasn't a romantic look. It wasn't longing. It was something deeper, something weary, grateful, afraid, and curious all it was. She had never been looked at that way before. Later, when the fire burned low, Grey Antelope approached Henry with a grim expression. "You grow soft," the old chief murmured. "The people talk because they fear your heart may wander where it should not." Henry's spine stiffened. "My heart is my own." "No," Grey Antelope said sharply. "Your heart belongs to your tribe, to your bloodline, to the spirits of your ancestors." Henry said nothing. "Do not forget your duty," the chief warned before turning away. Duty. The word felt like a stone tethered to Henry's ribs. He watched Ella laughing quietly with Winnie across the dying fire. The child leaned against her as naturally as if she belonged there. Ella lifted a strand of the girl's hair, brushing it away with tenderness, and Henry felt at the ache of wanting something forbidden. Not the wild, reckless desire of youth, but the quiet wish for a home no longer empty. That night, Ella lay in her lodge, listening to the whisper of the wind against the hides. She should have felt out of place. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt anchored. Henry's restraint, Henry's grief, Henry's unexpected gentleness. Dizzy thoughts spun through her mind until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. Outside, Henry stood alone, gazing at the stars with a heaviness he hadn't known in years. His father's warning rang in his ears. But so did Ella's voice, and Winnie's laughter. Duty and heart, the two had always been separate things. Until now, the desert grew restless in the days that followed, as though the earth itself sensed a storm brewing beyond the horizon. Birds flew lower. Coyotes called earlier. Even the air tasted sharper, carrying the metallic tang of something unspoken and spoken. Ella felt it first, though she couldn't have explained how. Each morning, she found the women quieter, the warriors more watchful. Winnie stayed close to her side, unusually clingy, fingers curling into Ella's sleeve, whenever footsteps passed too near. Henry walked the camp like a man waiting for a shadow to take shape. Something was coming. No one knew what, but they felt it. The danger arrived at dusk. A scout galloped into camp, horse lathered and trembling. "Raiders," he gasped in Apache. 10, maybe more. Whites and Mexicans armed, the scalp hunters, and with them soldiers from Fort Bayfield. Ella's breath stuttered. Her past had come looking for her. Within moments, the camp transformed from relaxed dusk into organized readiness. Warriors strung bows, checked rifles, tied back their hair. Women ushered children toward the safety lodges. Fires were tamped down to low embers. Henry strode toward the center of camp, his presence drawing a ripple of focus through the growing tension. When he saw Ella, he stopped. "You know these men?" he asked. "The soldiers?" "Yes," she admitted. "The scalp hunters?" "I fear I do. They've been trailing archaeological digs for months, stealing artifacts and selling them. I think they followed me west, hoping I'd lead them to sacred ground." Henry's eyes sharpened. "Then they come for you. And maybe for your people," she added, voice steady, despite the tightness in her chest. "They don't care who gets hurt." For a long moment, Henry said nothing. The wind tugged at his hair. Firelight flickered across the hard line of his jaw. Then he spoke. "You stay behind me." "I'm not a child," Ella snapped automatically. "No," he agreed quietly. "You are braver than any I've seen. But brave does not mean bulletproof." The words stunned her into silence. By the time the riders thundered into view, the moon had risen white and pale above the desert, casting long shadows across the plain. The scalp hunters rode in front, soldiers behind them. Dust spiraled from their hooves like smoke. They halted about 100 red yard from the Apache barricade. A gruff-looking sergeant cupped his hands around his mouth. "We're looking for a woman," he shouted. "Guite, mid-20s, brown hair, answers to Ella Hayes. We have reason to believe she's being held." "Ella está finit." Henry stepped forward. "She is under our protection." "A prisoner," the sergeant barked. Aghast, Henry corrected. Formed rigid as the mountains behind him. One of the scalp hunters spurred ahead, abandoned. Ella recognized instantly. A man named Rodas Llena, whose greed for relics had already left several dig sites plundered. "Hand her over," Pena sneered. "And we'll overlook this whole Apache hideout you've built for yourselves." Henry's warriors bristled, hands detaining on bowstrings. Ella stepped forward before Henry could stop her. "Sergeant," she called, projecting her voice across the open distance. "I am not kidnapped. I am not held. I came here willingly. The Apache have done nothing but protect me." Pena spat into the dust. "Protect? They just slit your throat once they are done using you. That's enough." The sergeant snapped at him, but his hand hovered near his holster. Ella swallowed hard. These men weren't here to rescue her. They were here because they feared scandal or because Pena had spun lies about Apache savages holding a white woman hostage. She had to control this or blood would spill. Drawing a slow breath, she lifted both hands as if presenting herself openly. "I am Ella Hayes," she declared. "I am alive. I am safe and I am not returning with you." Murmurs rippled through the soldiers. Pena snarled. "Lady, don't try that independent streak on us. You come back now or we take you." Henry moved so fast she barely saw him. One breath and he was at her side, body angled protectively, voice low as thunder. "You will not take her." Something inside Ella trembled, not with fear, but with an emotion she didn't dare name. The standoff stretched tight as a boring. Then, perhaps, sensing the Apache were too many and too prepared, the sergeant finally cursed, spat, and motioned his men to turn back. Pena lingered a moment longer, glaring at Ella with venomous promise. "This ain't done," he hissed. But it was done for now. The riders vanished into the darkness, swallowed by dust and moonlight. Back in camp, the air slowly relaxed. Warriors clasped arms. Women soothed frightened children. But Ella remained still, pulse thudding, the echo of danger still trapped in her bones. Henry approached her quietly. "You did well," he said. She let out a shaky laugh. "I almost got myself shot. He would not have allowed that." The shady in his full voice made her breath catch. Winnie bounded to Ella's side, eyes shining. "You were brave. You spoke like a chief." Ella knelt and hugged the girl, feeling a tide of protection sweep through her. "He was scared, little bird. But you stood anyway when he whispered, that's what matters." When Ella rose, Henry was still watching her. Not with suspicion, not with duty, something warmer, something more dangerous. She felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away, but her heart did not look away. That night, the camp gathered to thank the spirits for preserving peace. Ella helped clean the lodge, bandage a warrior's scraped arm, and carry water to tired mothers. Every gesture she made was met with gratitude and respect. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt not like a visitor, but lightfoot of Suellen. When she finally stepped outside, she found Henry waiting for her beneath a cottonwood tree, moonlight silvering the edges of his hair. "You risked yourself for us," he said softly. "You risked yourself for me," she replied. Their eyes met, held. The night hummed with crickets, with wind, with something rising between them that felt older than language. Henry looked away first, breath uneven. "This changes things," he admitted. "Yes," Ella whispered, her voice catching slightly. "It does." But neither of them said how. Not yet. Not with so many eyes watching, so much tradition weighing on their shoulders. Still, as they walked back toward the dying firelight, close enough that their hands brushed once accidentally, impossibly warm, both knew the storm outside had passed. But a far more dangerous one had begun inside their hearts. The days that followed passed like a long exhale, after a tight-held breath. No riders approached the camp. No threats rose from the horizon. The desert returned to its usual rhythm, whispering along the canyon walls as if nothing had happened at all. But inside the tribe, everything had changed. Word spread quickly. The white woman had stood for the Apache, and the air had stood for her. Children who once watched her shyly now raced to her side with stories and treasures, painted semasts, feathers, bone beads. Winnie clung to her almost constantly, her laughter ringing brighter each day. Even the warriors, who once regarded Ella with suspicion, began greeting her with nods of genuine respect. Only the chief remained wary, his eyes shadowed with caution. Whenever Henry and Ella crossed paths. One crisp morning, as Ella stepped out of her lodge, she felt a tug on her skirt. "Andy Ellie," when he said, breathless with excitement, "come quick. I want to show you something." Ella blinked. "Auntie." Winnie grinned. "So many people get titles when the tribe likes them. You earned yours." Worms bloomed unexpectedly in Ella's chest. The girl led her to a ridge overlooking the valley. The wind tousled Winnie's braids as she pointed proudly. "See that rock? Papa says it's where he saw Mama the first time." Ella's breath caught at the intimacy of the statement. "She was sitting on that very rock sewing a doll for me." Winnie's voice softened. "When I miss her, I come here." Ella knelt Thistle's eyes, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Your mother must have been very special." She was, when he whispered, her eyes lifted. "But you make the lonely places less lonely." "Yes," the words struck Ella with a tenderness that almost broke her. She wrapped her arms around the girl, holding her a little longer than usual. Behind them, footsteps approached, soft but unmistakably steady. "Henry." He stood a few paces away, hands behind his back, watching the two of them with a strange mixture of awe and uncertainty. It was as if seeing Ella with his daughter made something inside him tremble. Something long buried, now pushing toward the light. When Winnie hopped off the rock and ran ahead, Henry remained. "You're important to her," he said. Ella held his gaze. "She's important to me." Wind brushed between them, cool and fragrant with sage. "She saved her life," Henry murmured. "But more than that, she smiles again. She sleeps soundly again." "I wasn't sure I would ever see those things." Ella's heart pulled tight. Grief changes people. "It doesn't mean you failed her." Henry's eyes darkened. "I failed my wife. I was not there the night she died." Ella stepped closer. "Henry, she died giving life. That's not failure." His breath hitched, a quiet, unsteady sound. Then he turned away as though the weight of the moment was too much. But Ella saw it the way his shoulders loosened, as if her words had pressed a healing balm into an old scar. That evening, while the women prepared supper, Ella helped a few with grinding maize. The conversation drifted to harmless gossip at first: who had tanned the best hides this season, which warriors snored loud enough to shake tippy poles, until the subject shifted suddenly. "So," one woman asked slightly, "the heir visits you often now?" Ella nearly dropped the grinding stone. "Visits? No, he doesn't. It just appears sometimes." Another woman giggled. "A man does not appear unless he wishes to be seen." Ella felt her face flush. "You're imagining things." "No," the older grandmother said wisely. "Your hearts speak. But both of you pretend not to hear." Ella fled the grinding circle before the teasing grew unbearable. She didn't realize Henry had been walking past until she collided nearly chest first into him. He steadied her with warm, strong hands. "You run as if pursued," he said, eyes amused. Ella groaned. "Your entire tribe thinks we're," she sputtered. "That we something, and we are not." She froze. Henry's voice wasn't teasing, wasn't mocking. It was gentle. A quiet admission wrapped in a question. Before she could answer, a commotion rose at the far edge of camp. A young boy stumbled in, carrying his trembling sister, a girl no older than 10. Fever rolled off her in waves. Ella rushed forward instinctively, checking the girl's forehead, examining her pulse. "Eat sickness," she murmured. "And dehydration." Henry knelt beside her. "Can you treat her?" "I need herbs, juniper, willow bark, crushed yucca root, towels for cooling, water that's been boiled. Henry rose immediately. You will have them. What followed became the longest nap the tribe had seen in months. Allah worked beside the medicine man, blending traditional remedies with simple frontier medicine. The guru writhed, then shivered, then fought for breath. Ella held her through each wave, whispering gently, cooling her cheeks, refusing to leave her side. By dawn, the fever finally broke. When the girl opened her eyes, Allah sagged forward in relief. Henry, who had remained outside the lodge the entire night, watching the shadows move beneath the firelight, stepped inside. You saved her, he said softly. Ella shook her head. No, her strength saved her. He just nudged things along. But Henry saw the exhaustion in her face, the tremble in her fingers, the faint stain of tears dried on her cheeks. You care, he whispered. Yes, she said. I do. He stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth of him, the quiet gravity. Something deep and aching flickered in his eyes. Jube frightened me, he admitted. Ella blinked. I frighten you? You make me want things I told myself were gone forever. Her breath caught. The confession hung between them, fragile, powerful, sacred. Before she could speak, Winnie burst in, threw her arms around Ella's waist, and whispered, I knew you would save her, though. You save everyone. Ella pressed a kiss to the girl's hair, heart swelling. Henry watched them, a softness overtaking his features. The fear remained, but so did something stronger. Ope. Weeks passed. The tribe healed. The desert settled, and the bond between Henry, Ella, and Winnie was itself tighter, quietly, steadily, as natural as the passing seasons. One evening they stood together on the ridge as the sun dipped low, bathing the land in molten gold. Winnie held Ella's hand. Winnie held Ella's hand. Henry stood on her other side, not touching, yet closer than he had ever allowed before. Maybe I should continue my research here, Ella said softly. Used for one more season. And return to her. His voice was steady, though something tender rippled beneath it. Stay as long as your heart wishes. Ella smiled, feeling the truth settle warm inside her chest. For the first time in years, the road ahead didn't feel lonely. It felt like a path she wasn't meant to walk alone. Winnie squeezed her fingers. See, Andy Ellie, the desert is big, but no one has to walk it alone. Henry met Ella's eyes. And this time neither of them looked.